Live? What's happening, everybody? Looks like we are live. First and foremost, I want to send a very happy birthday to my beautiful wife, Natalie. Happy birthday. Slash is already in saying, what's up, man? I missed my 18 Scat, but my latest car, 14, is fun to drive. Nice. Mike's in. Slash is saying the previous owner already ripped the exhaust apart. Nice. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the topic. Is the Hellcat the right car for you? I always like to, get the early birds a shout out first off on the show, but want to talk about the Hellcat. Pose this question to you: are you sure you really want a Hellcat? I get a lot of questions about Hellcats, modifying them, pulleys, tunes, fuel pump, the whole bit. The list goes on and on. But these are all modifications to a car that's already rather capable. But is it really the car that you want, or is it the right car for you? And a lot of that's going to depend on what you're doing with the thing. So as of this video, it's basically the first quarter of 2022. There's a lot of Hellcats out there for sale. Tons of low mileage examples of these cars. And there's a bit of a reason for that. Gas prices aside, listen, if you got Hellcat money, you got money to put gas in the thing. But the reality of that thing is, well, a lot of folks buy them initially and figure out that it's a little bit too much car for them. And it's the smart ones that go ahead and get rid of them early. These are typically the guys that are coming from no other performance cars to begin with. These aren't former Corvette owners or Scat Pack owners, things like that. These are typically guys that want something fast. Hellcat, it's got a scary name. Anyway, long story short, they get a Hellcat. Maybe they're old school. A lot of them are old school guys. And they decide, man, I really want one of these Hellcats that are supposed to be fast, only to find out that, well, they can be pretty spooky if you're not necessarily used to cars that make 700 horsepower or more. So to that point, one of the issues that you can find yourself in, hold on just a second. One of the issues you can find yourself in just on the front end of this thing is, well, are you sure you can manage a car like that? We're talking about a car with 700 horsepower on a 275 rear tire. Hold please as emergency services goes blast. It's live, what can I do? So anyway, is the car going to be something that you'll be able to manage? And again, a lot of the old school guys get into these things thinking that, well, how tough can it be? These modern cars are easy to drive, only to find out that they are still quite a bit of a handful, but yet packed with a ton of nannies that take some of the fun out of them. Plus, they can be a bit complicated for the older crowd. So you see a lot of them up for sale. Secondhand cars are pretty easy to come by, and a really clean 2015 or 2016 will basically cost you about $52,000, $54,000, at least so far as I've seen, which is right in the crosshairs of about what a Scat Pack will cost. A little bit more, but not by much. So let's kind of get into this. Working about the cost, just the other side of 50 grand will at least get you in the conversation. I got some notes over here. You'll see me kind of glancing towards every once in a while. But I talked about the streetability of the car. It's not like you can get in one of these cars and just mat the throttle and immediately you're getting these 0 to 60 times in 3.5 seconds. It doesn't work like that. In fact, not even on dedicated drag race style radials, ET Street R, Hoosier DBRs, for example, they may not even be up to the task of getting one of these cars to hook. I'll give you an example. On DBRs on the street, on very good concrete, I've been able to run 10.6s with my car in albeit pretty good air, but that's on the street with somebody who's very experienced driving these cars on a tire that is crazy sticky. So yeah, I've been able to run 10s on the street with my cars, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an ideal situation. It's still a lot of power, and trying to get these things to actually hook from a dig is asking a lot. Probably not going to work in your favor if that's something that you're looking to do with one of these cars. Secondly, I got to basically jump on the grenade in the room, so to speak, which is the handling argument. Guys, look, it is a Hellcat. It is a car that weighs 45, 46, 4,700 pounds with driver. Is it going to handle well? Well, if you're talking about just being able to get around corners on the street, it's not bad. In fact, it'll actually surprise you with how well glued to the street it really is. But I think handling is always a bit misconstrued with another attribute, and that's road feel. The problem with the LX platform is that you are kind of insulated away from the road. You have to remember that this car has its DNA rooted in E-Class Mercedes-Benz. And because of that, they're incredibly stable at high speeds. You won't even realize that you're going speeds 130, 150, 170. Which I'll get to in a minute with how quickly it'll get to those speeds. But you don't really feel the road the way that you would in a Mustang or a ZL1, something along those lines, something that's got a little bit more of a handling flair to it, if you will. So I guess you can say that if it's a handling car that you want, well, Hellcat probably isn't the car for you, especially if you're more into the road feel. In that case, a ZL1 if you want something with quite a bit of punch, but just a significantly higher level of road feel. Get ready to pay the price for that, though. So, talking about, again, the streetability thing and how the car feels when you just map the throttle on the highway. The thing is, the cars are fast from a roll. Make no mistake. I mean, anything with 700 horsepower is absolutely going to catch your attention. But in the grand scheme of things, or I should say in the whole internet scheme of things, it's a dog. Listen, yes, for the amount of money that you spend on a Hellcat, you could put whatever amount of money you want to dream up if you're in the Mustang camp, the Camaro camp, or what have you, and have a faster car. Corvette owners already know this. I mean, it's weapon of choice, at least when it comes to roll racing and doing a pretty good business on a significantly lower budget, shall we say. But the reality is that those are modified cars. And in many cases, especially in my own experience, I've seen that these modified cars that are in practice faster than a Hellcat from a roll are less than durable when it comes to long-term use, misuse, and abuse, which is something that the Hellcat happens to manage incredibly well. And by the way, before I go any further, the Hellcat, when I'm saying the Hellcat, it's a Hellcat derivative. It could be an actual Hellcat, a Red Eye, a Demon. It doesn't matter. They all fall under the same umbrella when I say Hellcat. So, getting back to it, yeah, those cars can be faster. But again, those are modified versions of their own individual breed. And no, they will not be as durable. And they won't take the abuse that seemingly Hellcats have no issue dealing with. In fact, in some cases, you could argue that it's really not even abuse at that point when it comes to a Hellcat. It's just how they like to be ridden. That horse likes to be flogged. So, in saying that, it's not a roll race car. It really isn't. I mean, unless we're talking about a highly modified version of a Hellcat, which gets me into a completely different, frame of mind here when it comes into, tuning, modifying, and the like. So I want to touch on some of the modifications and tuning aspects of the Hellcat where you can really start to run into problems. And I want to dispel some myths, and I want to try to take out some misconceptions about the car along the way. So, if you're buying the Hellcat because you want to modify it, you've already thrown dig racing completely out of the question, unless you've got a drag strip nearby, which I'll argue is really the only place that you can actually extract any full or at least real measure of performance out of one of these cars. The street's just going to be a little bit too difficult. Although they're a lot of fun to drive around on the street, again, just don't expect to have the car hook up, have traction, and not just light the tires up at speeds anywhere less than 65 or 70 miles an hour once you start throwing pulleys, tunes, gears or what have you and aren't running on a significantly sticky tire. But to that point, basically, what kind of misconceptions are out there? Well, first of all, for you guys that have Hellcats or are looking to buy a Hellcat and have looked into different options like no tune required pulleys, yeah, that doesn't exist. Not unless you live at altitudes that are, your actual physical altitude is somewhere north of about 1,800 feet. The problem is that your actual density altitude, if you're any lower than that, will take you into a, well, let's just say that a portion of the tune that can't really deal with the higher air charge that you'll be feeding it with the pulleys that you may throw at them that are, again, marketed as a no tune. Also, keep in mind you've got injectors, these are fuel injectors, that really won't be able to manage that higher level of boost, so to speak, mainly because you'll be running up against injector duty cycle limits. Now, for you guys that live at higher altitudes, you go, well, that really doesn't apply to me. You know, this is more or less just a belt-driven intake manifold, and it doesn't matter that I'm putting this pulley on. There's enough area under the curve, so to speak, that the tune will manage my mods. Well, true, and good on you. You'll basically just be correcting your car density altitude-wise, albeit with a higher discharge temperature. For the guys that are running at lower altitudes, though, you are running the risk of pegging injector duty cycles, hitting temperature limits, and the like, not to mention having a couple of knock sensors that are going to be going absolutely nuts, pulling a ton of timing. Ask me how I know. I've had guys actually hand me their logs at the drag strip and say, hey, I don't understand. I put this pulley on the car and it's supposed to not need a tune, but the car's slower. Yeah. Welcome to the I Told You So show. So anyway, getting back to that, the issue with these cars is that they are heavy, and I've touched on that. So pulleys or anything along those lines, number one, you're going to need a tune to go along with it, injectors for sure. But one of the other things that you're going to run into with these cars is, well, fuel quality concerns. These cars are, well, they're making a ton of power, and they are incredibly heavy, all things considered. And so lots of weight, but you got lots of power means lots of load. And it's not like these cars have huge engines. In fact, they're not even the largest engine in terms of displacement in the arsenal, if you will, of Hemi. So a 6.2 liter trying to get a very large and heavy car moving, especially when it has no real compression to speak of at 9.5 to 1 versus basically 11 for the 392 and 10.5 for the 5.7. Well, you can already guess that the thing's going to be hanging on boost to keep the thing moving, which can make the car feel a little bit sluggish in off boost conditions, which is one of the things that gets on new Hellcat owners' nerves if they're coming from owning a Scat pack, for example. So I just want to get some points out there for you guys to think about. If you're thinking about buying a Hellcat, well, yeah, they're a lot of fun to drive. Lots of tip-in throttle response once you whack the throttle past about halfway down the travel. So in that case, they do a great job. But if you're looking to try to put one of these things together for a roll race combination, or for as a combination that you're going to be trying to do some kind of handling or I don't know, dig race type stuff, probably better off looking elsewhere unless you plan on sinking plenty of cash into tires and every other modification that's available for these cars to start to add for some durability. Now, again, these cars aren't weakly built. In fact, the newer versions of these cars, I've yet to see one fail because of a fuel quality issue. Getting back to that, though, you will, if you do decide to put pulleys on these things, run up against the limits of what 91 and 93 octane can actively manage when it comes to load because of the weight and because of the power. Walking around smart money will put you at about a 295 upper pulley if you really want to stay safe and still run pump 91 or 93 octane gasoline. There are some that'll argue with me and say that a 272 is just fine. Well, that's a 2.72 upper pulley. Well, that may be true in higher altitudes, but in lower altitudes, certainly not. And as a matter of fact, I could probably argue a fairly convincing case that a 3.0 or a 3.17 is probably the smarter play if you live at lower altitudes. But the reality still remains that you're going to be up against the limits of what 93 octane can manage, especially with stock timing tables, as these cars do come a little bit hot from the factory. And by the way, once you start getting into this, you'll hear about supercharger issues, or earlier cars have more timing than later cars. There's some trade-off in there. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that realistically speaking, the earlier cars tune is safer than some of the later cars, especially the 19 model year cars, because they have higher timing in a spot whereas that is a significantly higher load than at wide open throttle at a high RPM. So anyway, let me check in with you guys real quick. Roy, thank you very much. Saying, I stick to my Killer Bee Scat Pack. Good live chat, Mr. B. Thank you, sir. So the main issue here, though, is when you're thinking about what the car can manage in terms of mods or just getting out there and running the cars are hot from the factory, especially the Hellcat variants. A little bit less so for the Red Eyes, but Red Eyes have their own quirks, namely discharge temperatures and heat nannies that have a nasty habit of popping up every once in a while. But the reality is that the Hellcat is a little bit hot from the factory, and they do ride the knock sensors. And if you've ever seen a data log, I can assure you that stock Hellcats will pull 2 degrees of timing almost like clockwork. On 91 octane, it's really more like 3 and sometimes even 4. Actually, 93 can go 2 to 3 degrees of timing depending on discharge temps and actual fuel quality. And in fact, with questionable fuel quality, stock timing values, stock Hellcat can pull 3-4 degrees of timing, and you would almost consider it to be normal. Again, that's just poor fuel quality showing its head. But these cars are high strung when it comes to their fuel quality needs. So just know that coming into it. You can't just go down to the local, bait shop and fuel emporium and fill up with whatever swill they've got in the tank. You've got to be mindful of the fact that you have a 6.2 liter engine that is making 700 plus horsepower. You got to feed it the right stuff. All right, so let me check in with you guys real quick. Nitro Crew is in with the flex. Michael Corleone is in. What's up, my friend? Ryan McKenzie is in. Y'all guys saying, what's up, my man B? I just moved to Dallas. Lots of pretty girls out here. Bro, they manufacture them and distribute them out of Dallas. Eric saying, good evening, Professor B. Got the flex. Complex Vision's got the flex and the wrench. I like it. Frederick's in. Hold up. Where are they at? Here we go. Got the ball guy with the shades and the flex. I like it. These are polarized, so whenever I turn my head, everything gets Technicolor on that screen, which I like. It's fun. Freddy's asking, what about the jailbreak? It's just, there's nothing to the jailbreak. It's just a customizable kind of Build-A-Bear type of a version of a Hellcat. Tucks his hand, saying it's been a while. How you been? Good. EB saying gas price per gallon, expensive. It'll probably change by the time the live show is over with. DE is in saying, sub B, got the flex. Craig saying, wow, I guess I need to junk my Hellcat and my Red Eye. I'm so stupid to own 2 of these cars. No, not at all. If it's in the budget, buy 3. Nitro Crew saying, being my Hellcat is a fun car. I often think I'm bored of it and maybe should sell it after a quick 3rd gear pull. It scares itself back into my garage for a while longer, and I come to my senses. So that's a strong point. It's what I was talking about earlier. Guys get these cars and they don't realize especially, again, if you're not coming from a performance car background, these cars can be extremely spooky. Spooky in a way that, well, a lot of guys just don't pick up on it. It's the fact that these cars, a Hellcat with a 262 gear, doesn't have that thrust, the G's pushing you back in the seat. But the problem is that it's pushing you back into the seat with quite a bit of force, just not as much as if it had a more aggressive gear, for example. The issue there is that you look down at your speedometer, and what you think is 90, 95 miles an hour is 125 or 135 miles an hour. Again, getting back to the stability of the platform. Incredibly stable, but it can kind of lull you into a false sense of security, a false sense of safety in a lot of ways is probably a better way to put it. But the big thing here, though, is if you're thinking about Hellcat in terms of a purchase, I don't want this thing to turn into me bashing it or trying to talk somebody out of it. There's a lot of goods, a lot of good upside to it. They look the part. They are very fast. They only lose to cars that are significantly modified, and that's a real point, by the way, to put out there. You're not going into any conflict unarmed with a Hellcat, that's for sure. It's just the idea that what you get from the factory is really good, which lends me to kind of my next point, which is the value. The Hellcat and the Hellcat family is a high value purchase, not just because it's expensive, which it is, but you get a lot for your money, and you get a platform that can take an absolute whaling without even so much as a bat of an eye, raise of an eyebrow. I'll put it to you like this, guys. My car, Chandelier, aka Revlon, aka Red Alert, she's got hundreds of passes on her. I think I quit counting passes on that thing at around 350-ish. So the car's got so many passes on it with no mechanical failures whatsoever. I've got to believe that you cannot say the same about other platforms. In fact, I know this to be true given what I've seen at the drag strip. You got to think about it. Over the last few years, that car has, well, I'll put it to you like this. Whatever miles I put on that car have been going to the drag strip, going down the drag strip, coming down the return, and then getting back into the staging lanes at the drag strip. It's not like this thing has only made a couple of passes. And all of its passes, most of them, I should say, at one point were done in the heat, in terrible density altitude conditions, hot, muggy, gross. And in all of those conditions, the car was running 1050s. Give it some really good air, pull the passenger seat. Next thing you know, the girl is running 10 teens, deep 10 teens, as a matter of fact, with a 1008 to her credit. And that's without even removing the sway bar. So again, it kind of puts things into perspective as far as how these things can run, and that they will do so long after other cars have failed. I'm reminded of why I bought a Hellcat every time a Mustang frags a transmission, snaps an axle, has other unmentionable things go wrong with it, only just to not bring it up. You know, you just don't mention the word, right? But I've seen this happen over and over and over again with Mustangs. ZL1s. It's rare to see anybody actually put any effort into a ZL1 these days, but when they do, they run really well. Problem is, I've seen ZL1s fail. Not many, but a whole lot more than I've seen with Hellcats. But it brings me to another point. And again, I was talking about, I don't want to sit here and bash the cat, but there are some things that you need to know about Hellcats if you're going to buy one. And I want to make sure that this gets to somebody, if they're thinking about getting one of these cars, that you've got somebody with a lot of experience with these cars talking to you and informing you about how to modify them correctly, or at least what to expect once you start to modify them. So let's get into that after I get into you guys. Blaze saying diesels is even worse. Check your owner, operator, trucker friends. We are not okay, for sure that. Callus is asking, has your opinion of the Hellcat changed since you first bought it? Yeah, I wish I'd have bought it earlier. That's my biggest opinion of the car. It goes to the idea that, man, I probably should have got one before I got the Scat or the SRT or any other Scat Pack. The problem is that the Scat Pack I was a little bit jaded with that car, with just how snappy and fun it was to drive. So, my opinion hasn't changed. I've actually grown a lot more fond of the Hellcat since owning one, especially over this number of years that I've had mine. But to that point, owning the Hellcat has made me appreciate the Scat Packs even more. I know that may not make sense to some of you guys, but for you guys that have owned Scats and then got a Cat, I think you'll understand what I'm saying when I say that. Him saying, hey, be good topic. I've considered a couple of Cats over the years, liked them, but not enough to get rid of my Scat Pack, which I really love. And that's kind of another point here. Him saying, there is a nice Hellcat at a Mercedes dealership I might look at tomorrow, but honestly, it's half-hearted curiosity itch I just want to scratch. I can understand that. Tux is saying that the Honda just cracked 80 grand. Nice. Keep changing that oil. It'll last forever. Jay saying, I want a Hellcat. I can understand that. Eric saying, I test drove a 2020 392 TA and seriously considered trading my 5.7 Daytona for it. At 50 grand, am I dumb not to try to find a used Hellcat for close to the same money? I'll put it to you like this. Let me come back to that question when I'm kind of a little bit deeper into this chat. But what the crossroads that you're at, and I got to tell you, this is where, here's the thing. If you drive the Hellcat, you won't buy the Scat Pack necessarily. But if you drive the Hellcat, you're going to find that if you drive them back to back, you'll know where your money's spent when you drive the Hellcat. The problem is that the Hellcat is, well, everything that I'm talking about tonight. If you're not used to a Scat Pack, driving a Hellcat's potentially going to scare you away from owning a Hellcat. Especially when you get the thing on the highway, you mat the throttle, you find yourself doing 130, 140 miles an hour, and it doesn't feel like you're going that fast. For a lot of guys, it messes them up in the head a little bit. It sounds, ooh, neat, wow. It's not. If you're not used to that level of fast, it'll scare you out of even wanting to play with the thing. Yeah, you'll learn it. You put it in 500 horse mode and play with it all day long. But at 50 grand, you can get a nice, clean, used Hellcat. But you're going to be short on warranty just based on the 15, 16 year type of a thing, just timeline. The Scat Pack is going to be a ton of fun, and it'll be power that you can use, and you can use all of it all the time. The only time the Scat Pack suffers by comparison to the Hellcat is in actual numbers. And one of the things that I'm reminded of when the question that you just posed comes up is how often I've taken my SRT down the drag strip and on the same night would have to drive one or two other Hellcats or a Demon that we were working on, a Red Eye, whatever it was, when I would drive those cars down the drag strip. The weird thing that I came across, and this is on both cars on a tire, the strange thing about it is that, yeah, the Hellcat might leave a little bit harder, and I guess it would pull a little bit better on the back half of the track, but you didn't really come away from this experience going, wow, my mind is blown. That's 700 horsepower. Well, when you've already got 500, 700, I mean, it's more, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's 40% more horsepower, which is a lot to be sure. But going down the drag strip doesn't sound any different. It kind of feels different, but it's not miles away from what the Scat Pack is like. One of the things I liked about the Scat Pack is that on a drag pack tire setup, it would always hook. I mean, that thing would dead hook on a Glacier by comparison to the Hellcats that I was driving. And you really only started to notice the difference when the cars started running numbers very close to that 9-second range. And this is in kind of crap air too. That's really the only time that you would notice a significant difference between the two, because realistically, you've got a car that's more aggressively geared going down the track versus a Hellcat, at least with a 262. Now, obviously, a red eye with a 309 is going to hit a little bit harder. It's going to do a little bit more to the sense of acceleration, but even the Demon didn't feel like it was far and away crazy fast by comparison to my SRT. As a matter of fact, I got to tell you that they weren't, I mean, they were a second off of each other on the same night, which is a lot, but it's not like blow your mind, reevaluate your sense of fast difference in terms of fast. On paper and on a number it is, but in practice, Scat Pack's a really good place to be. Jason saying he's got a Scat, but he wants to get into a Hellcat. Well, Roy's saying if you drive it, you'll want it for sure. Randy's in from Middle Tennessee. I like it. Catalyst is asking, what are the labor hours for installing the Sniper kit? I still have mine from last year before I bought a Hellcat. Still thinking of picking up a used Scat to install that sucker. Let's see. Total hours on that, I want to say is, oh, God, I got to see to remember. I'm just going to shoot out a number and say it's going to be somewhere around 14 total. 12 to 14, I think, is the flat number on that. Some shops will charge you less, though. Your rates may vary. Nitro saying, older gearheads recall how hard it was to make a 500 horsepower car in the late 80s and 90s. That sold me on the Hellcat platform. 700, a lot of people take 700 horsepower for granted. Yeah, so to that point, you know, we're talking about the value proposition of these things. And, you know, old schoolers, you know, really blowing their mind really with this 700 horsepower. Well, for a modern car, you know, 700 horsepower is not that difficult to achieve. And as a matter of fact, the scary thing about these cars is that 700 horsepower is factory horsepower. 800 horsepower for your red-eye variants, although that number is suspect at best. But the reality is that the Hellcat platforms in general are solid 750 horsepower platforms if you average the two together at least, and that's being polite to the red-eye. But the reality is the red-eye's got a lot going for it in terms of durability, dual pumps, really stout short block, even by comparison to the Hellcat, which is already very stout. But then comes the modification. The modification bug is, well, let me just rephrase that. The modification itch is very easy to scratch when you've already got a supercharger attached to your car. So upper pulley, lower pulley, fuel system, E85, and now you've accidentally backed yourself into a combination that is, quite honestly, on accident going to run a mid 9-second pass at about 138, 139 miles per hour. We're talking nutty types of fast at this point, but now a car that is practically useless on the street at wide open throttle, and quite honestly, a bit of an annoying thing to drive around if you do want to try to play around with your car. Well, let's just say that being ham-fisted or lead-footed, treating that throttle like a light switch, yeah, that's not going to do you a whole lot of favors with that car. As a matter of fact, one of the weird statistics with Hellcat owners, especially once they start heavily modifying these cars. You guys have heard me say this before, but it bears repeating because it's just one of these Hellcat truisms. Upper pulley, lower pulley, and a set of twin pumps in a Hellcat. Convert that thing over to E85 with your injectors, you got a 9-second car that you're probably going to, if you're walking in lockstep with statistics here, going to sell within 12 to 14 calendar months. You might say, well, why would you put all that time, effort, energy, and money into a car and then turn around and just sell it within a year? Well, it usually takes guys about that long for their egos to mend after the car basically scares the living hell out of them. And you say, what do you mean? How would that happen? Well, when you take a car that's making 700 horsepower at the flywheel and basically bump it up to about 1,000 horsepower at the flywheel, tire technology just ain't there to try to help you hook up. And even though you might say, well, you were just talking about the car not being that great as a roll race platform. Anyway, what's the difference? Well, the difference here is that you will find yourself at 65, 75, 85 miles an hour lighting the tires up going down the freeway. And although that sounds pretty romantic and pretty cool, the reality is that if you don't want it to do that, it will still do it if you bury your foot in the throttle. Bit of a judicious application of that go pedal is needed and a lot of self-restraint to go along with it. So for guys that end up building these monsters, they also start to find weak links in the car. Axles are a funny thing. The axles are a weird weak link in these cars because they don't just break right away. They basically just get their butts kicked over a certain amount of time, and then they'll fail at either the boot or usually the CV joint pops, or you shear them at the actual hub itself on the sides of the diff. Drive shafts for the more modern cars typically don't flake out, but I know that the DSS twin CV shaft seems to be, at least so far as I know, fairly well received, with red-eye drive shafts being kind of where the smart money goes, at least in terms of guaranteeing yourself a very smooth and vibration NVH engineer grin-inducing driving experience with these cars. So, but those are the only really strong weak links that are in the car. Well, that is until you start to data log the cars, and if you have a pump that gets a little bit weak and injector duty cycle starts to spike, and well, if you're not paying attention to these kinds of things, you can end up popping one just because you had a weak fuel pump and you didn't even know it. So there's odd things that can go wrong with these cars that nobody really seems to concern themselves with. And well, not to mention, or I should say notwithstanding, the fact that there are some shops that will, throw booster pumps at things and just try to ramp up voltage to the sky and basically cook the pump in an effort to feed the engine with enough fuel to keep it motivating the thing down the track without rods exiting stage left and right. Now that will work just fine for a shorter period of time, but you are admittedly shortening the life of the fuel pump. So again, judicious application of data loggers are extremely important in those cases. You notice how none of this sounds too sexy anymore? It doesn't sound like too much fun. It sounds like a bit of a pain in the ass, and more to the point, it sounds like a little bit more of a nagging issue than anything else. Basically, your car, which was initially kind of like a buddy at that point, just wanting to go out and have fun and do burnouts for distance, is now trying to do burnouts for distance going down the highway at greater than highway speeds, and is, well, basically creating a necessity for you in terms of upkeep and monitoring and everything else that you might not have a mind for, or just simply don't have a taste for it. So that's why those cars end up getting sold. They get probably one or two times they'll go to the drag strip, and of course every prospective double pulley Hellcat owner will always have their drag pack and ET Street Rs or DBRs on the ready. but they may only get a couple of uses. It's not uncommon to see drag pack wheel and tire setups for sale as a preemptive cash grab before that car actually ends up getting put on the same website for sale. So again, something to consider. Don't ruin the car by modifying it to where it's literally scary to drive. That is honestly unmanageable, if nothing else, not as streetable as what you would have thought. See, the scary thing about the cars at that power level, you haven't added a camshaft. You haven't done anything to the car to even hurt fuel economy outside of you're going to now need to tune the thing for E85. I hope I mentioned that earlier, but if I didn't, you will. But the reality is that you've turned something fun into something ferocious. Once you get that tiger by the tail, it's just a matter of time before you get bit. So let me check back in with you guys. Roy's hanging out with Randy talking about the snow. He's hanging out. Randy's hanging out with Roy. Let's see. Jerry's saying, I love a Hellcat, but I wouldn't trade my 1320 for it. Running 11.5 stock and leaving people in awe is priceless. Well, see, and there's that too. And I do want to talk about the Scat Pack trading up to Hellcat proposition. Well, let me just touch on it real quickly. With my SRT on a drag pack, I used to go sniping after Hellcats. They were easy prey on the street because my car, if I pulled any weight out of it and really good air, was a low 11-second car with the stock cam. So in kind of air, it was a 1140, 1160 car. And that is very difficult to mess with if you're even on a drag pack with a Hellcat on the street. The Scat Pack, you can watt the throttle and now it's a game of catch. And yeah, the Hellcat would reel me in, but after I'm into the throttle for about 6, 7, 8 seconds, basically what would be about an eighth of a mile on the street, you're already rolling out of the throttle. You might be rolling out of real estate at that point. In which case, score 1 for the Scat, score 1 for the SRT, and watch your frustrated Hellcat owner lament the fact that he's got so much power that he just can't hook it up on the street. Should have started in second gear there, sports fan. But that being aside, they're a lot of fun on the street. And to be fair, if you don't have a drag strip anywhere near you, there's nothing to compare the Hellcat to. They're both fast. I mean, both of them will get you 0 to jail about as fast as you can imagine it happening. So with two platforms they are the same platform that will cruise effortlessly at 120, 130 miles an hour or more, then it's easy to see why a lot of guys with Scat Packs, after the proposition of owning a Hellcat comes up, they basically move away from it. Because frankly, you can use every horsepower that you bought in a Scat Pack. Can't do that with a Hellcat. So by that value proposition, the Scat is a better value. Travis saying, I ordered a Scat Pack wide body shaker with a 6-speed manual. Should be here in about 2 weeks. That'll be a fun car. Ordered back in October. Not going to the track. Didn't want to spend the extra money on a Hellcat. I don't blame you. Tux is asking about letting cars warm up. I'm always a fan of letting cars warm up. Main thing is oil temperature. You don't want to go just slamming the throttle on a car with cold oil. It's not a good idea. Even with today's multi-viscosity oils, good idea not to do that. But that being said, because modern fuel injection has cold startup enrichment and there are provisions for torque management for cold engine coolant temperature conditions, engine oil temp conditions as well. There's no harm in firing the thing up and just driving it, provided you're not starting the car up and showering down on the thing the entire time you're driving it. Not a good idea. Sovereign saying, hey, B, what's up, Sovereign? Hanging out with Travis and Sovereign. Let's see. Sovereign saying a tuxedo with a modern Hemi with the Ivy oil pump, probably not. The earlier ones seem to have maybe a lower volume pump. I know that with my tradesman anyway has incredibly good oil pressure at idle at about 44 psi. Cal is saying buying a Hellcat like willfully going into a haunted house and then being scared of the ghosts when they see them. Well, it's there for entertainment, for sure. The main thing, though, you don't ever want to find yourself tempting fate with these cars. And that's one of the things that I've, again, tried to explain, is that you will find yourself going faster in a Hellcat than you really did expect to be going, just based on sound. And one of the funnier stats rather, is how many guys will admit to that coming from a Scat pack to a Hellcat. You know, you cruising down the highway with just not paying attention to the speedometer, just by the sound and the feel of what else is going on with the car. And you notice that you're constantly going about 15 to 20 miles an hour faster in the Hellcat than you would in the Scat. It's just it's a function of having a 262 gear in a car that when you tip into the throttle at really more than about a third throttle, you've got this wave of torque. You just kind of get to these speeds a lot more quickly with the Hellcat than what you would be used to in the Scat, even though the thrust of the thing, the G's, are basically about the same. Oh, Randy's telling Travis about the Barton shifter, for sure. Oh, so's liking that light gray. What is that, Destroyer gray? I forget the names of those newer colors. They're really nice, though. Let's see. Travis got the thumbs up. I like it. So saying, but I have less of my RT than a stock Scat. I have less than 26 into it, so no payment sounds better in my opinion. Well, there is that. And again, you know, either way you go, it's not an inexpensive proposition. So for the guys that are thinking about going with a Hellcat, and again, we're talking specifically about Hellcats tonight, but if you're moving from a 5.7 to a 6.4, the idea is basically still the same, but you are going to be collecting cost at an astronomical rate, though. You know, going from a Scat pack of the same vent, you know, like a 2015 Scat versus a 2015 Hellcat, you're easily looking at $20,000 difference, or at least $15,000 difference in pricing. So it's a lot of money, but you're getting a lot of car for that money, and a car that's going to, in the Hellcat, hold its value very well. And more to the point, not only will it hold its value very well, but it's a car that you really can have a lot of fun with, provided that you just stick to the recipe. And I'll get to what I'm talking about here in just a second. Let me check in with you guys. Chuck's saying, coming in late. Sorry, saying cold oil is thick. Yeah, it is. Tux is hanging out with Sovereign some more. Let's see. Oh, Boondog is saying, hey, what's the threshold for torque management with cooling or oil temperature? So there are, I can actually pull that up for you in a stock tune. It's under torque management on the engine side. Basically, it is a oil temperature and a coolant temperature torque limit that doesn't allow peak torque. In other words, it'll hang the bypass open and limit throttle until the coolant temperature gets to, I can't remember the exact number, or the oil temperature gets to a certain number. So I'll see if I can't dig that up here momentarily if this thing will cooperate with me. Happen to have my computer with me, by the way. So I'll see if I can't dig that up at some point. But it is relatively significant. As a matter of fact, let me do this. Bear with me, guys. I'm going to answer a tuning question here. Hold on just a second. Engine, torque management, general. Let's see. I gotta find it in here. It will be under. So, for example, let me go engine coolant temperature. It'll be a little bit easier for you to read it. That is an engine coolant temperature torque management table. So as you can see, at low engine coolant temperatures, basically at anything less than about 100 degrees engine coolant temperature, it's going to start limiting significantly the amount of torque or amount of power that it'll allow. Engine oil temperature, same one. And actually the EOT is a little bit more aggressive, so that'll give you a better idea as far as when it will and when it won't allow full power. 967 is kind of a default number for these cars. It just basically means get whatever you can get out of it. But for example, EOT at oil temperatures that are going to be less than 100 degrees, that's usually when you're not going to be able to see full power out of these things. And so hopefully that answers the question for you on that question. Air charge temp. I haven't looked at that one in forever. Anyway, getting back to you guys. Anyway, but I hope that answered the question for you. Hemminghead is saying, I put some NGK iridiums in my Scat pack just to see if it makes any difference at the track. The stock NGKs had a slight orange tint from boost stain. Yep. And I don't use much, about 1/4 ounce per gallon for track insurance. It's not going to hurt anything, I don't think. Travis is asking, do I think oil catch can is necessary? Depends on the application. Hellcats, I don't run one on mine. And when I did the video about the throttle body and throttle body testing, I actually showed the inside of the snout on my supercharger, and it's completely clean. So, is it necessary? Not really. I will say this. There is quite a bit of oil vapor, condensation, and everything else that will get into the intakes. And when I was doing intake porting, it didn't matter, though, if the car had a catch can on it or if it didn't have a catch can on it. I would still have quite a bit of residue in the manifold itself. So for whatever it's worth, in that respect, for the NA stuff, maybe it's worth it, but it doesn't really affect power or performance. One of the reasons why I say that is a catch can is not the period at the end of the sentence when it comes to a solution for separating oil from the vapor going into that intake manifold. And the reason why I say that is because in many ways I've felt that catch cans can be a bit of a red herring. The problem is that you have vapor that is being drawn through your intake manifold into the cylinders, and that vapor includes hot air, because it is a route. You're coming in from the intake track through the crankcase and then into the intake manifold and then being consumed. You know, kind of think of it like a circuit in a way. It's more of a track than anything else. But when you have this vapor, everything is in suspension, tiny little particles. Well, when you put a nucleation site in the middle of that flow, it's going to drag everything that hits your nucleation material, your media, in this case steel wool. The vapor hits it, comes out of suspension, drops and goes into the can. But not all of it gets picked up. I don't know what the percentage is because each can, I'm sure, is different. But the reality is, if you've got one catch can, what does it pick up? 15% of the vapor? 25%? The other issue with a catch can, and this is the big thing for me with catch cans, why I don't necessarily like them, or why I don't advise for them anyway, is that number one, I haven't seen a performance improvement by having a catch can under any circumstance. With Hellcats, it can possibly be different when high boost conditions arise. Anyway, that aside, naturally aspirated stuff, or even Hellcats in a way. The problem is if you're not emptying the thing. See, the issue isn't really the fact that this stuff is coming out of suspension. It's the fact that if you don't empty the thing, then over time it fills up. And the more it fills up, and the more it fills up, and the more it fills up, next thing you know, you're siphoning basically whatever content is in your catch can. Instead of it just the vapor coming out in little drops coming into here, now you're sucking part of the contents of your catch can into your engine. And you want to talk about a heavy concentration of condensation, oil vapor, and the like. Now you've got a significantly higher concentration coming out of the thing. A lot of guys don't realize that catch cans, you got to empty them, or at least check them about every second, third, or fourth time you put gas in your car. So now you're stuck having to deal with that part of maintenance with this thing. Whereas you got plenty of guys that are out beating the snot out of their cars with no catch cans and don't even have to worry or think about this stuff. And again, I'm reminded of the fact that, well, quite frankly, haven't seen any big gains from putting catch cans on the cars. There's not going to be any octane dilution from something that is in essence the amount that I was getting. And you can see the videos that I've done on this before back in the day, but it was one of these little Pepsi bottle or one of these little Coke bottle caps full of this stuff after, I don't know, call it 1,500 miles or something like that, or even 1,000 miles. And the funny thing about it, or after a couple of tanks of gas, whatever the case was, but when you consider the fact that it was that small of an amount of stuff being mixed into, or basically being diluted by the equivalent of 30 gallons of gasoline or more, at least 40 if you're going full tank loads here on 2 tanks of gas, kind of hard for me to think that it's going to dilute it. Anyway, the scary thing that they'll show you is, well, look at all this oil that we're getting out of the intake manifold, and they'll wipe their finger in there and it'll be oily. That's just an oil sheen that gets in there. Every manifold that I've ever ported, again, that either had or didn't have a catch can had that going on. It had some kind of an oil film in there. Really, the only time I would get concerned with a car, as an aside from porting manifolds, was the fact that I could tell you what kind of filter they were running in the car by the amount of sediment that was actually in the intake manifold. K&N filters, if it was a daily driven car, or a green filter, if it was a daily driven car, I could almost tell you which one it was, because you would have particles of crap inside the intake manifold. So just so as you know. Oh, Sovereign's liking the punch of the Scat. For sure, they're awesome. Sovereign's hanging out with Tux. Let's see. So saying Hellcat's the best bang for the buck for its price, hands down. You know, again, coming from a value proposition, I have seen, and again, I want to say this again because it is important. Again, for you guys that are thinking about getting a Hellcat, One of the upsides to a Hellcat is just how durable it is, especially by comparison to anything that is remotely in its performance envelope. I have seen Hellcats get just mollywopped by their owners every single time they drove the car, and yet it still was pristine, basically, with the only downsides to the car being excessive brake wear from very aggressive stock pads. Rotors are expensive to swap out, but hey, again, expensive car, very fast, you're gonna have a lot of maintenance items to play with. But the main thing to consider when you're thinking about all of this, again, is the value of that car. Not only in the fact that it holds its value for a long period of time, in other words, resale value is high, it's very much in demand, but man, they're built like a tank. So yeah, they weigh about as much as a commercial barge, but the fact of the matter is that they're built like a freaking tank, and they can take a beating in ways that other cars can't. And I'd like to kind of hang on that for just a minute. Again, I don't think that I've stated it properly when I say that a Hellcat from the factory on a drag pack is a 1070 to 1080 car in halfway decent air at about sea level. It is, if nothing else, an 11.0 car or a 1090 car, right? I have seen guys with Mustangs try to get cars to that level as cheaply as they could, only to have them or see them fail, or listen to them talk about how quickly, for example, the transmission let go or a half shaft let go. These are things that happen when you try to throw a bunch of power at parts that just simply weren't designed to handle the type of power that the components are in the Hellcat. So if long-term ownership, and I guess this is really the overall value of what I'm trying to convey here, if long-term ownership is your goal, the Hellcat is an incredibly good platform to look at. So to that point, why would I say, okay, so the reason why I would say it like that is if you get yourself a Hellcat and you do the basic minor mods to the car, let's say that you, aside from wheels and tires, stuff like that, let's say that you decided you wanted to put a pedal commander on the thing and that's it. You'd have a car that would be fast, fun to drive, that would never really give you any headaches, that aside from basic maintenance, you wouldn't have anything to concern yourself with ever with that car. And it would always be a 10-second capable platform, like always. So, it will absolutely run 10s, no question about it. And it would do so all while maintaining factory warranty, which is another funny thing when you consider it. Realistically, how many factory cars can run 10s under warranty? It just blows my mind. So there is a lot of value in the car, but just know that once you start modifying anything, all bets are off. I can't really speak to one tuner or another. I can't speak to fuel quality across the board or component failure just because stuff goes bad or breaks. But for every Hellcat that I've seen go down the drag strip, I've seen at least 7 or 8 Scat Packs, Mustangs, Camaros, and everything else go down the track alongside of it. And more often than not, the Hellcat comes away with the W. So something else to consider. It's a great car to learn if you want to get into drag racing just in general. It's a great car to learn because you've got the 500 horsepower mode cheat code available to you, which is also kind of fun too. Oh, Randy's talking to Travis. Yeah, hopefully I gave it. You understood what I was getting at when I'm talking about the catch cans. Oh, Himmy had saying talking price difference between Scat Pack and Hellcat. I'd get almost 40 grand trade on my Scat Pack, and the Hellcat would be about 65 grand. So it'd be about a 25,000. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's a minimum. That's why I was saying 20 grand is kind of a pivot number there. Oh, Boone saying thanks for those the torque management numbers. You bet. Gary's asking if I can recommend someone to tune his trans, TCM, PCM. You also have to tune the engine side of that as well. Can't just do the trans by itself. It won't do any good. There's too much on the engine side that you have to adjust as well to go along with that. It depends on where you are and what kind of access you have to remote tuning. But Pite's Performance can do it. Lots of places can take care of that. But I used to work for Alex over at Pite, so take a look at that if remote tuning is an option for you. Roy's asking, can't put a catch can with a shaker scoop, can you? Yes, you can. You end up mounting it kind of low on the left-hand side. Boots is saying he doesn't run one on his, talking about a catch can on his either. Yeah, I just never did. That's what Stuart's saying. What's up with that silly Mopar ad? Buy 3 tires and get one for free. Who would want just 3 tires? No thanks. I'll just have the 3. I wonder if you buy 2, if they'll give you a discount. Like you can't get 2 and get the 3rd one for free. Did you get like 50% off your 3rd one if you wanted to do that? I don't know. Oh, Hemmy's hanging out with Roy on that catch can question. Yep. Let's see. Oh, Sovereign saying if I did somehow own another Mopar, it would have to be a Challenger wide body Scat Pack with the proper tires. Nice car. Oh, Travis saying thanks for the in-depth answer. You betcha. Let's see. Just kind of scrolling through here. It looks like hang on, let me get back over here. Some are saying 3 PCs on the Hellcat. I don't know what that question is. So's asking about a 2016 Yukon. Anything to look out for? The Trans 4L60 is kind of glass, but I mean, no. I mean, they're good trucks. Oh, BMLMZ saying got his 21 Hellcat Charger to turn off cat overtemp. You can do that. It's still a good idea to keep them somewhat in play, though. I wouldn't kill it 100%. That's a component protection. If you're really spinning that thing hard and you turn off cat overtemp protection, you can end up popping one of those biscuits. It's rare when that happens, though. Typically, you won't be in the car long enough to really hang the temperatures super high. I wouldn't think anyway. Oh, Sovereign's saying, yeah, just the cat's just more expensive for sure. Saying he had to pay $2 grand to get all the HPT hardware and license to get remote tuned. Yep, that ain't cheap. Let's see. Bear with me, guys. And now that I'm into the question answer portion of the show, hopefully I answered as many questions as I could for you guys on the Hellcat. Is it right for you? By the way, I want to kind of wrap that up. For a lot of guys, what ends up happening is you bite off more than you can chew with the Hellcat, especially when you start getting into modifications. The same can be true of Scat packs. And really, you know, when it comes to the value proposition of do you want to go faster, the right answer is get rid of the Scat pack and get a Hellcat. From, again, a value proposition. Can you make a Scat pack fast? Sure you can. Done it to a lot of them. But the reality is if you really want to start going fast, in other words, into the tens, then the right thing to do is to get a car that already goes tens. If you get bored with that or decide you want to change things up, you got one of two options. You can either modify the Hellcat that you got, or you can sell it, and chances are you're going to get a lot of your money back with a stock Hellcat versus a highly modified Scat pack or SRT, the derivative. You know what I mean? 392 stuff. Let's see. Jay saying, I'm one of the guys looking into trading my 1320 for a Hellcat. I feel now's the time to do it. Once production stops, the Hellcat will be hard to find and expensive. Well, from an internal combustion standpoint, you're 100% accurate. We'll see what the offerings are going to be for, you know, the EV stuff coming down the pipe, but I don't know how well that's going to be received. Let's see. Oh, Sovereign saying if you can afford it, money's no object. The Hellcat's where it's at for sure. BM saying that the factory COT enrichment fouled his plugs as well. Man, that thing must have been going nuts because factory, in fact, COT, which is under fueling, is temperature. Hang on. Tell you exactly. Temperature control. Threshold is 1749 degrees. And fuel air enrichment. I mean, it's actually a fuel air enrichment adder. You know, where's my pull up? I'll tell you what it is. It's about 10.5 to 1 air fuel ratio. If memory serves me correctly. I've actually got to pull up my calculator and go. 0.0722 plus 0.0358 equals 1.08. It might be, yeah, it's got a max of 9.25. So if you were hammering for a max fuel enrichment, that would have been really, really rich. But the reality is that if you're getting that hot, man, you're wailing on that throttle. So if that's the case and you're actually getting it to that high of a temperature, because it's a bit of a sliding scale. Unfortunately, I don't have access to, because you have to remember that the cat temperature is derived. It's not an exact measurement. It's derived based on load and time. But let's see. By the way, this is where I'm at in the tune. It's temperature control under fuel for you guys that might be interested in seeing where I'm at with that portion. That's one of the areas, not the only area, but it's one of the areas where you would actually pull you would actually start to pull the temperatures up for cat protection. And it's all based around fuel air enrichment maxes. And that's the table right there. And again, that's a straight flag table, but it's actually a sliding scale. I don't think we have access to that. We just manipulate the temperatures and go from there. Because I've actually seen it. Let me see something here. Knock at her. Yep. Anyway. Want to bring that to you guys too, so you had it since the question came up. PM saying $500 for new plugs. Yeah, that's reason enough almost. Some are saying for the average Joe, I'd gather the 5.7 6.4 is more than enough. 6.4 is plenty for the street. But I mean, there's always a market for more. Some are saying, thing is, I cannot accept the SXT trim. Yeah, tell me about it. Oh, Stuart's saying the Scat's cheaper than the Hellcat, but unless you start wanting to mod it, and that's the problem with the Scat, is that everything is expensive. You know, a camshaft swap is going to run you $5,000, right? The funny thing is that all of these dollars that you spend on the Scat, you'll never see again, between the cam, the springs, the stinky tie bars and collars, if you do it right, long tube headers and all of that. You're not really going to remove that stuff when you get rid of the car. It doesn't make dollars much less making sense at that point, right? So you got to think of it in those terms. You have spent the money, but more to the point, you just kind of thrown that cash up into the air, and you're still, that money could have been put towards buying the Hellcat, something that you can absolutely get your money back out of. Some are saying the 3-piece rotors. Yep. Oh, BM said he couldn't make a pass without falling on his face at the end of the track. Man, I tell you what, that would be weird. I mean, unless the car was just idling for a long period of time. But even then, I don't know. It sounds to me like something else may have been going on. But typically, I will see, like, on any given pass, I'd have to pull up some really old data logs where I was actually looking at that parameter, that PID. I would typically see it start to go rich at about maybe the 1,000-foot mark, and you'd see it go from a commanded 12.7 to, you know, you'd see it drop down to like 11.5. You'd never really see it get much more aggressive than that. Except on a couple of occasions. I actually did see it get as rich as 10.8 equivalent ratio. So there's that. But yeah, if it was really falling on its face like that, then yeah, man, it might have been a good idea to get it turned off. It's been a while since I've even thought about cat over temp. Travis saying he's a parts manager at a Dodge dealership. We get to buy 3 tires, get one free for $1. Nice. Tux is asking, what's the best truck out there that can live for a while? Good question. They're all not bad. Fords aren't bad. Let me see something here. BM saying that the temp is 1701 now on the 21. You got me to thinking I've got a 19 read file. I just want to take a look real quick at the 19 read file. So they must have lowered it because the 19, wait a minute. I wonder if that's part of the whole new reflash that they get and why they do the component replacement, because even the 19 hang on a second, the 19 is also, hang on, I'll pull this thing up real quick for you guys. 1794 on target cat misfire. No different there. Target cat temp, there won't be any difference there. So yeah, for 19, it's still 1749. And this is just doing a straight compare file. And the only reason why you're going to see differences in this is that there's some differences in enrichment time, but that's kind of irrelevant because it just tabletops. But anyway, that's what a 19 looks like. So it's still very much a, hang on, wrong one. That's a different table. Sorry. There you go. There's your target cat temp. That's when we'll start actually adding fuel to it. But if it has gone down, oh, and BM saying with it off, I see 1849. BM saying 9 AFR when it kicks in. That would mean that calculation that I did for you earlier, that basically 9 and change, would be if it's seriously throwing a ton of fuel at it, it will get to that. It's more of a sliding scale, though, from what I've seen. Again, there could be changes, though, in the operating system, which would change that. And again, you know, if you're only seeing 1800 degrees, you're still well within the range of what I would consider safe. I mean, I have seen higher, significantly higher than that. So I'd say you're good. You start seeing temperatures of like 2000 degrees, probably don't want to see temperatures of 2000 degrees come up. Very often, you know, you just don't want to hang them at like 2100, 2200 degrees. See, Tux is hanging out with Sovereign. Stuart saying he wants to see the Royal Lancer. I don't know, man. I want to see something like the Monaco. If they're going to do something old school, you know, Luxo barge, that'd be kind of neat. Hemi Head is out. Good seeing you, brother. Oh, BM saying it was happening every time he'd make a pass. Yeah, I mean, well, if that's the case, then it's so low. So BM saying, yeah, Dodge changed it when they did the recall for the Cats and dropped it to 1701. Kind of makes sense in that case. Kind of crazy when you think about it, though. 1701, man, that's low. That's real low. I mean, that car is going to hit 1701 pretty quickly. As a matter of fact, let me see something. Hang on a minute. Let me look at something real quick. This is something I haven't even looked at in a while. We're going to get into one of my logs. Oop, here we go. Really can be any of them. Anything track related. Let me just pull one off of the actual going to the track. Cat over temp. I think on this pass it didn't get that high because the car wasn't running for very long. Let's see. Let's see here, folks. Oh, right. It's like this, even with my car running richer at the 8th mile, it was over. I can't really show too much on this one because it's actually really good tune. Can't give this one away, but I will tell you that my cat over temp was higher than yours. So yeah. Oh, Roy's saying his wife has a 5.7 RT and the only time she let me drive it was when it needed an oil change or maintenance. Found a used Scat pack. Nice. Go Mango 1320's in saying hello, Mr. Mason. What's up, man? Oh, goodness. Hang on. Stuart, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Asking, do I think the remake of the Christine movie is a bad idea and should they just use a modern Challenger? Oh, God, don't tell me they're remaking Christine. Please. I mean, is the movie industry so creatively bankrupt that they have to go in and try to dredge up all the nostalgia porn that they can when it comes to making a movie? I mean, Christine was a really good movie. It is a really good movie. And I just don't know that they could actually do better than the original. It's one of those things where trying to do better than the original is a bad idea. Should they do a remake? No, they shouldn't. And if they did do a remake, the problem is that Christine would have been a 30-year-old car at the time that that movie was taking place. I think the movie was supposed to be taking place in like circa 1987 or something like that, right? So Christine would have been a 58 model year. So, you know, you're looking at, like, say it was 1988 is when it was taking place. A lot of, you know, disco era Camaros and other cars running around. So let's just assume that. So we'd actually have to look at something from the 90s for a modern era remake, right? I mean, look, I don't know what you'd use. The problem is there wasn't anything from back then. I mean, maybe, I don't know, a Daytona. It just doesn't really have the same flair, you know, it doesn't have that same, and what are you going to do? Like in the radio, is it going to be playing Stone Temple Pilots or, you know, some kind of 90s grudge complaint rock or something like that? Like how would you even play that out for a modern remake, right? Because again, if you're going to go era for era, you would have to go with a 30-year-old car, which would really put you at like 1992. Ah, crap. Well, this isn't looking good for the Dodge. You'd always have to go back a little bit, maybe a GLH. I don't know. It wouldn't work out, though, I don't think. Besides, there wasn't anything red with a white top. So anyway, I don't know. If they're going to redo it and they're going to use whatever surplus Furies and Belvederes there are out there to make the show, I don't know. I wouldn't do it. I just don't think it would. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more creative license. They're going to, I have a nasty feeling it's going to get ruined. I haven't heard about this, but now I want to cry. But thank you for the contribution, but I appreciate it. Oh, Roy's saying he had a F-150 with a 302 and he loved it. Really good truck. Go Man Goes asking, which cam do you recommend from Pike's Performance for my 1320? Would love to run 10's full weight. For your 1320, so there's a couple of cams that I would recommend. Either CDO1 or CDO2 would be really good options for you. Those are two that would definitely get you there. High 10s and good air shouldn't be a problem. I know Quick Bricks Charger with a CDO1, which has no lope, by the way. That car went an 11.2 at like 121 in incredibly good air, but that's full bolt-on with a cam, ported manifold, larger throttle body, and the like. You can go a little bit more aggressive than that cam and get a little bit more of a lope out of it. It just depends on, you know, what your wants are for how the car is going to sound. I'm not going to tell you that it's going to go out and run 10s in the middle of summer, but I can tell you that you'll have a combination that should get you pretty close, if nothing else. So, you know, and that's just with a cam, long tube, stanky tie bars and collars, PSI 15, 16 springs, 080 push rods. And that's all you would really need if you're going to be going through Pikes. That combination is a known power producing combination, at least ET producing combination, I should say. Oh, Go saying called and got a phone guy who wasn't really any help. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't get a call from anybody on that. At least I didn't see a call from anybody asking me to put a cam together for them. So, but like I say, CDO1, pretty chill cam, not any real low. runs really hard. And as a matter of fact, if you're on E85, it runs real good. I thought I had a, well, maybe I don't. Maybe it's somewhere else. See if it's in here. May actually have a dyno sheet on that combination. Hold, please. Do I have a combination on that? I don't have one in this folder, but they lay down pretty good power. I know that his, I think, put down 470 to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno and ended up putting like almost 500 to the rear wheels on a dyno jet. So that'll give you an idea of how much power they make. Miguel saying TRXs are slow on the highway. Well, yeah, they weigh 6,500 pounds and it's a mid 12-second truck, so it's not going to be super fast, but it's very fast for what it is, and it'll eat a freaking Raptor alive. Let's see. Sovereign saying no remake of Christine. Okay, good. Yeah, there is only one. Sovereign saying it will always be a Fury. Funny thing though is that the color combination would have been a Belvedere. The Fury for that year, I believe, was white only. Oh, Sovereign saying, look up the remake of Vanishing Point. It sucked. Yeah, I think they tried to make that Challenger a Hemi car. The original Challenger from Vanishing Point was a 440. By the way, there was never a Hemi-powered movie Dodge. All the famous Mopars that you've ever seen on screen were all 440 cars. Aside from the General Lee, which was a 383, but you had the Charger, the two Chargers that were actually bought locally for Bullitt were both 440 black with a black vinyl top. Vanishing Point was a 440 car. So, you know, and the list goes on, but none of them were Hemis. Oh, KZ1000, yes, circa 1978, but produced in 83. I knew it was something like that. Go Man saying, which cam typo? I know you said one with bolt-ons would go, 10.8 to 11.2s. That's just the entry level cam. That's the CD01 with a, you know, it's basically just kind of a, I say entry level cam. It's a really good cam for that combination though. And it works really well with the power range of the stock intake manifold. It does really well. So it's also known as a sniper cam with Dr. Differential and Speed. Oh, say loves the sound, but not necessary. Gotcha. Sovereign saying, yeah, the 2007 was a 426, 71 was a 440. Yeah, that's the whole funny thing about it is I remember that. In fact, it's weird you mentioned that because I just saw that like just a pop-up today, and I'm like, no, the newer car or the newer movie is a 426, and it was like, no. It's like they're trying to up, you know, like, I don't know, get over on the old one. I don't know, kind of weird. But yeah, that made no sense to me. Scat saying, good evening, B. Good evening, brother. Oh, Cody's saying that the Turbo 4s pull too much at his heartstrings. Man, listen, I love them myself too. They are a lot of fun and don't get enough credit, man. And that's the thing that sucks about the Turbo 4 stuff is that you know, a lot of guys just don't get how good they can be. But with that, guys, we're about an hour and a half into it, and I've got to wrap it up. But I want to say thank you to each and every one of you guys for stopping by. Love each and every one of y'all. Would not be able to do this without you. Get out there and do something cool for somebody. They probably need it more than you know. And if you send it, don't bend it. Keep your shiny side up. And with that, fellas, I got to wrap it up. Y'all have a great one, and we will catch y'all on the next one. Take it easy.